This is a story that begins with a question. Some men live long lives and leave little behind. Others live for barely 3 decades and leave questions that refuse to die. Major Isaac Jasper Adaka Boro was one of those men. To some, he was a freedom fighter. To others, a rebel. To many in the Niger Delta, he remains the lion of the creeks. A young man who dared to challenge a system he believed had forgotten his people. Nearly 6 decades after his death, the questions he asked still echo through the creeks and oil fields of the Niger Delta. But before he became a symbol, before the headlines, the prison cell, the battlefield, and the legend, he was simply a child born in a small riverside community called Oloibiri. And it was there, in the early hours of September 10, 1938, that the story began. Oloibiri lay in the humid creeks of the Niger Delta, a maze of mangroves, winding waterways, and scattered mud huts. His father, Boro, was headmaster of the only mission school there. Before Isaac was old enough to understand the world around him, the family moved from town to town following his father's postings. But no matter where they lived, the Delta never really left him. As he grew older, Isaac began to notice a contradiction that would stay with him for the rest of his life. His homeland sat on immense wealth, yet its people remained poor. Then came 1956. Shell struck oil in Oloibiri in commercial quantities. It was a discovery that would change Nigeria forever. The money, however, flowed outward. The consequences stayed behind. While wealth traveled to Lagos and Enugu, the creeks inherited gas flares, oil spills, and neglect. As a child, Boro showed unusual intelligence and determination. He passed his first school-leaving certificate with distinction and later attended Hussey College, Warri, graduating in 1957 with one of the finest West African school certificate results in the school. After secondary school, he taught for a time. He understood the power of education and the weight of a piece of chalk in shaping young minds. In 1961, he joined the Nigerian police force. The discipline suited him, but the politics did not. Winning a scholarship to study chemistry at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, seemed like the beginning of a different future. At UNN, Isaac excelled academically and rose to become student union president. But while he studied chemical formulas in lecture halls, his thoughts often drifted back to the Delta. The further he advanced in education, the harder he became to ignore the injustice he believed was unfolding at home. He watched oil from his homeland fund schools elsewhere, build roads elsewhere, and support development elsewhere, while communities in the Delta still struggled for basic necessities. What had begun as concern was becoming conviction. In his autobiography, The 12-Day Revolution, he later wrote, "I left school to lead a protest against the exploitation of oil and gas resources in the Niger Delta." At this stage, Boro was not calling for secession, he was calling for fairness. The federal government and the eastern region were receiving nearly all the oil revenue, while the Delta received only a tiny fraction. The people whose land was being drilled were drinking water polluted by crude oil. Then came the moment that would define his place in Nigerian history. On 23 February 1966, Isaac Boro made a decision that stunned the nation. With 159 young Ijaw men, students, fishermen, workers, and former policemen, he formed the Niger Delta Volunteer Force. They possessed few weapons and little military strength. What they lacked in firepower, they made up for in belief. From Kayama, Boro proclaimed the Niger Delta Republic. For the first time, the frustrations of the Delta were no longer being whispered in private conversations. They were being declared openly to the nation. Today is a great day. We intend to destroy the apparatus of oppression. We are going to fight for our freedom. For 12 days, the NDVF held part of the creeks. They ambushed federal troops, sabotaged pipelines, and avoided direct confrontation whenever possible. It was not a campaign to conquer territory, it was a signal flare. But 12 days was all the young republic would get. On 5th of March 1966, federal forces overwhelmed the movement. Boro and his men were arrested, charged with treason, and imprisoned. The irony came quickly. Only months later, Nigeria plunged into crisis. Coup, counter-coup, and ethnic tensions tore through the country. The grievance Boro had raised, the fear that minority groups were being marginalized within a federation dominated by larger ethnic blocs, suddenly seemed far less isolated than it had before. Prison, yes. However, it would not be the end of Boro's story. In May 1967, on the eve of the Nigerian Civil War, General Yakubu Gowon granted him amnesty. The federal government needed fighters who understood the difficult terrain of the Niger Delta. Then came a decision that would divide opinion and follow his legacy for decades. Boro joined the Nigerian army and was commissioned as a major, fighting on the federal side against Biafra. To many supporters, the choice was confusing, but Boro's struggle had never been primarily against the Igbo. He believed the real problem was a political structure that left the Delta voiceless, regardless of who controlled it. In his view, preserving Nigeria while forcing it to address minority rights was the faster path to justice. Others saw betrayal. The debate has never fully ended. What is less disputed is the way he fought. Boro's knowledge of the creeks made him invaluable in the 3rd Marine Commando Division. Soldiers under his command respected him. He shared their food, walked their patrols, and refused to send men into danger that he would not face himself. Boro had survived prison, revolution, and war, but a final fate was closing in. On May 9, 1968, Major Isaac Adaka Boro was killed near Ogo, close to Okrika in Rivers State. He was only 29 years old. Official reports stated that he died in action, yet eyewitness accounts and later investigation raised questions about friendly fire and betrayal. The full truth remains uncertain, swallowed by the confusion and violence of the Civil War. He left behind a wife, children, Deborah, Esther, and Felix, and family members who remembered him not only as a fearless fighter, but also as a tender and patient man. Death came, yet it did not silence him. Boro did not live to see the end of the Civil War, but the idea as a champion survived him. Kentarawiwa would later quote him. Mujahid Dokubo Asare would call him the first freedom fighter of the Niger Delta. The Joy Youth Council designated February 23 as Isaac Boro Day, and communities across the Delta continue to remember him each year. What many once dismissed as a 12-day adventure is now viewed by historians as the first major armed assertion of resource control in Nigeria. Boro helped frame a debate that still shapes the country today. Who owns the oil beneath the soil? Who bears the cost of its extraction? Scholars often argue that his most powerful weapon was not the gun. It was the idea that the Niger Delta was not merely a problem area, but a region with legitimate political claims and rights that demanded recognition. Away from the chaos of change, Boro was also a husband, father, and brother. His wife recalled him singing to their children in Ijaw. Family members remembered him spending hours repairing broken radios, displaying a patience that contrasted sharply with his fiery political activism. He was not a flawless figure. He made tactical mistakes and underestimated how rapidly Nigeria would descend into full-scale war. Yet, one belief remained constant throughout his life. People living on oil-producing land should not be condemned to polluted water and neglected communities. In his own words, the people of the area deserved a fairer share of proceeds of the oil wealth. Now, we are back to the question that started this story. Today, Oloibiri remains a place of difficult contrasts. The first oil well stands largely as a monument to history. The creeks still bear the scars of extraction. Yet, the question Isaac Adaka Boro asked all those years ago refuses to disappear. Who benefits from the wealth beneath the soil? and what becomes of the people who live above it. Boro called it an unfinished project. Nearly 60 years later, the